As parents, we tell our kids all the time that we don't pick favorites, but Billy, if you're watching this, it's totally you, bud. As expensive as those therapy bills would be, don't worry, we don't actually have a little son named Billy, but I do have 2 sibling offsets to choose in between, and I have been putting off this decision as long as possible. So let me catch you up quickly on the backstory. I started my journey with offset smokers a couple years ago, and I picked up the very first model that Smoke North offered, which was a 60-gallon offset, comparable in size and functionality and features to something like the Franklin offset. And as much as I fell in love with it immediately, I found myself, if I'm going to go through the trouble, the hassle of running a fire all day, which is remarkable in terms of its quality, I want to fit a whole bunch more on there. So when I was limited to between 4 to 5 racks of ribs in a smaller offset, I immediately started to have buyer's remorse in wishing that maybe I had looked at a larger size model. Well, a year or 2 later, Smoke North updated their product lineup, and I should stress here, as a customer, I went and bought, in part because I have a YouTube channel and I want to review these things, but in one of my worst financial decisions on the channel ever, I went and bought both sizes of the new models. So the Gen 2 Carlisle, which was the replacement to the original version Carlisle that I bought, as well as the one that I was kicking the tires in my head after the fact for not getting the 110-gallon Huron G2. I put those through their paces, and for the exact same reasons. Even though I loved the new features in terms of the integrated water pan, having the flat top cook surface for either heating my wood splits or simmering sauces, all those features were the same between the G2 models, but having more space just made more sense. And last year, I declared the G2 110-gallon Huron model as my forever offset. And we were doing just fine, cruising along in backyard offset nirvana until the phone rang, and it was Smoke North asking if I'd do them a favor and try the new Echo reversible offset. So over the past 6 months, I've had the opportunity to put the borrowed Echo reversible prototype through its paces, as well as make a couple suggestions that have made its way into the production version. But now that the day has come where the truck is scheduled to come back and pick this up, I had an interesting phone call. See, someone's called in to Smoke North and said, do you have any used Huron G2 demo models for sale? I'm really interested in the Huron, but I want it at a bit of a discount to full price. And so Mike, the owner of Smoke North, called me up and said, James, I've got an interesting option for you. I've got someone, if you're interested, who will buy your Huron G2 for enough money to allow me to buy the Echo prototype, and it would be a complete break-even situation. So while I'm not spending any money, I'm not losing any money. So it really just comes down to, if you could absolutely choose, which many people looking for an offset are in that position, which of these 2 would you have? And that is the decision I need to make today. So let's start with one of the most popular questions that I get asked, which is, how much space does something like having an offset take in the backyard? Well, having more than one, a lot of space, but assuming like normal human beings, you're only going to have one. Let me show you a really interesting size comparison here. So this won't be a perfect measurement, as I'm just going to line this up sort of over the top of my collector, run along our chamber here, and do the eyeball looking down. I'm at about 94 inches in total length. My first build G2 Huron actually had a larger firebox at 28 inches versus now 24 is the standard on all models. So this problem is even exacerbated. So 94 inches in comparison to the Echo reverse flow. And the eyeball test, we're about 76, 77 inches in reduced space. So we're almost 20 inches less length taken up in the backyard. But here's where things get interesting. Let me show you inside the cook chamber. Let's take a look inside our Huron G2. So this, of course, has a larger grid, being a larger cook chamber. So our cooking grid here is 45.5 inches. And as much as that sounds like absolutely having more space, one of the things with the direct flow offset, I'll put a visual up here that I discovered on my first offset, is we tend to avoid a little bit of a hot spot zone right near the firebox and another one near the collector. This was reinforced when I did some IR data testing with an IR camera, which could absolutely see the same hot spot zones in the cooking grid. So if we remove a couple inches from either side in terms of what your actual usable space is, you're somewhere in the range of about 33 inches of having complete even temperatures, front to back, left to right. Let me show you what that looks like inside the Echo. So here we are on the Echo, so let me show you the grid size. And there we are, about 34.5 inches is the distance of our complete grid cook chamber. But because we have a baffle underneath here, so our firebox is right here and heat is coming underneath of our baffle and then up and around the side. What I've seen in cooks as well as with the infrared camera data is that our entire cook surface is the same temperature. So you can see where I'm going on that. We have approximately 20 inches less space consumed in the backyard for the same useful cooking real estate. And the story continues to get even more interesting from there. Like many of you, and you have let me know down in the comments that you've fallen for some of the same online bias. And this is not a slant against any creator who has a bias. We all have our favorites. But when I was in research mode, there's a heavy bias towards direct flow, traditional flow, standard flow, whatever you want to call them, offsets, which is what my Huron G2 is. But now that many of my favorite creators, whether it be Jerby, Chuds, or Mad Scientist, make, manufacture, and sell and or promote direct flow offsets as their line of business, you can't help but wonder if something like the reverse flow is getting its fair shake. And so to try and answer that bias, I did a video earlier this year comparing the two, and I was blown away at what the data says versus just what the opinions say. And so the summary of that, if you didn't have a chance to see that video, I definitely recommend checking it out. But the highlight reel here is, as I confirmed in my cooks, something like a reverse flow offset smoker does cook 20 to 30% quicker. And for me, that opens up things like being able to do a same day brisket. Instead of starting at 3 in the morning, I can get away between 5 and 6. So it's much more manageable for turning even a long cook like brisket out in the same day without having to rely on a hot hold in my oven overnight in order to have that brisket ready for service. The concerns around the baffle radiating too much heat. Chuds in one of his videos mentioned he did ribs in 2 hours.
It just doesn't work as well as your traditional super convective offset cooker. There's so much radiant heat that everything cooks a lot quicker, and those ribs were done in 2 hours. You're not gonna get much smoke flavor in 2 hours. The bark has a weird texture to it. The edges here got dry and the top got dry. Yeah, that looks like trash. Feathery. Interesting. Yeah, now I'm starting to find that underside where it got toasted. Shreddy, beef jerky-like.
That might just be a design limitation of the different model. Not all offsets are created equal, but on my two offsets that I had available for testing, the difference in the water temperature between the direct flow and the baffle plate was 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the data up on screen. Same with the evaporative cooling. Again, there was not a night and day difference, and all of that led into reaffirming the real world data that I've had in terms of cooks getting done in the neighborhood of 20 to 30% quicker, but not, half speed or ribs in 2 hours or anything like that. So not only do we take up less space in the backyard, we also get the benefit of the signature offset flavor. Now, when I did a direct head-to-head, the beef ribs that I did on my direct flow took that 30% longer. So to my eye, I liked the bark and the smoke profile slightly better than what I got off of the reverse flow. But as soon as that video was done and I took everything in and a family did a blind taste test, they all picked the smoke profile of the reverse flow. So we are splitting hairs here to put it at its closest or put it at its best in terms of the smoke profile and the bark. And so I don't think the concern of I would be forfeiting the real offset experience if I were to go with something like a reverse flow over a direct flow to be true. Like, I'm gonna call this myth absolutely busted. So less footprint in the backyard, same useful cooking space in terms of the holding a consistent temperature or a cooking bubble, if we want to call that, and not a significant difference in terms of bark and smoke quality. As you can tell, I made up my mind. The offset that is going to stay here is the Echo Reverse Flow. I'm going to let my beloved Huron G2 go on to the new owner that's going to buy that and allow me to buy this one for a complete wash. So what I've learned in all of this experimentation and trying to find a forever offset is, first, I've fallen in love with the offset experience. Like, this is awesome. Like just interacting with your fire. I know a lot of people are concerned about that, but the split here is every hour or so is my interval for adding fresh wood. The simplicity of just tossing in a couple logs, the smells, the aromas, the result in the barbecue, it is fantastic. And as I've gone through several different iterations of trying to find my forever offset, there's been a couple things that have become clear, which is the larger offsets, they're easier to run. So bigger is better when it comes to picking a backyard offset. Getting the same bigger offset experience in a smaller form factor like a reversal, I think will appeal to many people. And this has given me the confidence, speaking of bigger is better in the future, a bit of a dream at this point, but something I would love to have is a tow behind trailer offset model where I could take the barbecue party on the road, whether it be at church, events, competitions, or things like that. And so I think for me, moving forward, if I want great barbecue on an offset in the backyard, something like a reverse flow gives me all the advantages and the benefits that I want in a form factor that takes up the least amount of space. And if I want sort of the party wagon, the full direct offset, I think that scales down better into something like a trailer rig. And perhaps maybe this is what creators years ahead of me, people like Jeremy Mad Scientist or Chuds and others who have 250, 500 or 1,000 gallon offsets, is this is where this form factor really shines. It's no wonder it's one of the most popular options in Texas Monthly restaurants that are featured regularly, is it just works so well in a large size. But after my last couple years of testing in 6 months with a reverse flow, I'm actually not sold that it shrinks down to the backyard size as well as something like a reverse flow does. And so that is where I've landed in terms of making up my mind. Echo is the new backyard offset model that's staying at my house. Thanks so much for hanging out and journeying with me on this process in terms of trying to figure out the difference between reverse flow, direct flow, and models. I hope that my experience has helped inform your decision, as well as providing you with the actual facts so that you can make an informed decision for yourself if you find yourself fortunate enough to be adding an offset smoker to your backyard in 2024. That's it for today. If you got any questions, be sure to check out the members live section. I go live once a month and you can ask me any questions about these pits or any other smoker that I use on the channel in a real-time basis versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today. Don't be afraid to fire it up.